Nicki Minaj has spent more than a decade occupying a singular position in popular music. She emerged as a dominant creative force in rap, built a devoted global fan base, and maintained relevance across shifting industry cycles. Over time, her public identity expanded beyond music to include commentary on media, politics, and institutional power. By the mid-2020s, she was no longer viewed only as an artist competing for chart position, but as a figure whose statements carried cultural and ideological weight. The music industry in which Minaj operates is highly structured. Major awards shows such as the Grammy Awards function not only as celebrations of artistic achievement, but as symbols of legitimacy and inclusion. Appearances, nominations, and wins reinforce an artist's standing within the system. Absence, whether voluntary or not, often invites speculation. In this environment, public perception is shaped as much by ceremony and recognition as by output. Minaj's relationship with these institutions has been uneven. While she has received commercial success and critical attention, she has also been openly critical of award bodies, media narratives, and what she views as selective recognition. These tensions did not begin in 2026. For several years, she has questioned voting processes, industry alliances, and the influence of gatekeepers. Her critiques have increasingly framed the industry as a closed system that rewards conformity and punishes dissent. At the same time, Minaj's public positioning has evolved. She has made appearances alongside political figures and aligned herself with commentators who frame entertainment culture as hostile to religious or conservative values. These choices placed her at odds with many peers and commentators, while strengthening loyalty among a specific segment of her audience. As a result, her public statements began to be interpreted through a broader ideological lens rather than as isolated reactions. The Grammy Awards remain a focal point in this dynamic. They are one of the few moments each year when the music industry presents a unified public image. Hosting choices, jokes, and omissions are closely scrutinized. Artists who are not present are often discussed as much as those who attend. In this context, commentary made during the broadcast can carry symbolic meaning even when intended as light satire. Minaj's absence from the 2026 ceremony was noted immediately. She was not scheduled to perform, and she did not appear in the audience. During the opening monologue, host Trevor Noah referenced her absence with a joke that linked her to political figures outside the music industry. The comment was brief, but it reached a large audience and became one of the most discussed moments of the night. Public reactions to the joke varied. Some viewed it as routine award show humor, others interpreted it as dismissive or targeted, particularly given Minaj's recent public positions. Within hours, clips of the moment circulated widely online, often detached from the broader context of the ceremony. As is common in contemporary media cycles, interpretation quickly replaced intention as the primary focus. The days following the ceremony saw heightened attention on Minaj's online presence. Her social media platforms, which she uses directly and without intermediaries, have long been central to how she communicates with supporters and critics alike. Unlike traditional press statements, her posts often blend personal reflection with broader claims about culture and power. This direct style has allowed her to bypass conventional media filters, but it has also intensified scrutiny of her language. By early February, the conversation had moved beyond the Grammy ceremony itself. Commentators began situating Minaj's response within a larger pattern of opposition to mainstream entertainment institutions. Her past statements, political appearances, and public alliances were revisited and reassessed. For some observers, these elements formed a consistent narrative of resistance. For others, they suggested a growing distance between Minaj and the industry structures that once supported her rise. This context set the stage for what followed. The power structures involved, the contrasting interpretations of legitimacy, and the evolving role of an artist operating both inside and outside the system created conditions for escalation. What began as a moment of absence and commentary had expanded into a broader examination of influence, belief, and belonging within the modern music industry. What remained clear at this stage was that the moment was not being treated as an isolated controversy. It was understood as part of an ongoing recalibration of Minaj's public role. Rather than engaging in a dispute over awards or recognition, she appeared to be positioning herself in contrast to the system itself. The language she used and the themes she referenced suggested a framework that extended beyond music into questions of morality, belief, and authority. At this point, no outcomes were evident. There were no formal responses from award organizers or industry leaders. There were no clarifications or retractions from Minaj. Instead, the situation existed in a state of suspension, defined by implication rather than resolution. The introduction of spiritual and ideological language signaled a shift in how the conflict might unfold, but its direction was not yet clear. Following the Grammy Awards, attention shifted quickly from the ceremony itself to Nicki Minaj's online activity. Within days, she published a series of posts that marked a clear change in tone from her earlier critiques of award politics and media bias. Rather than focusing on recognition or industry fairness, the language she used moved into moral and spiritual territory. In one post, Minaj claimed that a favorite artist was involved in a satanic cult, and that this group engaged in acts described as blood sacrifice and ritual mutilation. She did not identify the individual or provide evidence to support the claim. The wording was broad, symbolic, and accusatory, framing the music industry not as a competitive marketplace but as a corrupt system driven by hidden practices. The timing of the post, coming shortly after the Grammy ceremony, and the public joke about her absence led many observers to interpret it as a response to that moment. The post circulated rapidly across platforms. Screenshots and excerpts were shared widely, often detached from their original context. Some readers focused on the spiritual language itself, noting that references to satanic rituals and child sacrifice closely resemble long-standing conspiracy theories about global elites. Others focused on Minaj's choice not to name any individual, which left room for speculation while avoiding direct legal exposure. Minaj followed the initial post with additional comments reinforcing the same theme. She wrote that the jig is up, a phrase commonly used to suggest that a hidden truth has been exposed. In doing so, she positioned herself as someone revealing information that others were either unwilling or unable to acknowledge. The framing was not personal grievance but moral accusation, suggesting that success in the highest levels of the industry required participation in evil acts. This shift in framing drew immediate reaction from fans and critics alike. Some of her supporters encouraged her to go further and identify those she was accusing. They interpreted her words as whistleblowing and viewed her as courageous for speaking out against powerful figures. Others within her fan base expressed discomfort, noting that the claims were severe and unsubstantiated. They worried that the focus had moved too far from music and into territory that could damage her credibility. Within the broader music community, the response was more restrained. No artist publicly acknowledged the accusations directly. Several figures who have had past disputes with Minaj remained silent, avoiding engagement with the claims. This lack of response reinforced the sense that the industry was unwilling to legitimize the narrative by addressing it. Media coverage reflected this caution. Major outlets reported on the posts as part of a broader pattern in Minaj's recent behavior. Rather than treating the allegations as factual claims, articles emphasized the timing of the post, the language used, and the historical context of similar conspiracy theories. Rather than repeating the accusations in detail, journalists framed them as expressions of distrust toward mainstream entertainment institutions. Commentators also noted Minaj's increasing alignment with political and cultural movements that position the entertainment industry as hostile to religious values. In recent years, she has appeared at events and alongside figures associated with conservative activism. These appearances were revisited in coverage of the post, with analysts suggesting that her rhetoric fits within a larger ideological shift rather than a spontaneous reaction. The Trevor Noah joke resurfaced repeatedly in this discussion. During the Grammy broadcast, Noah suggested that Minaj was absent because she was at the White House with Donald Trump. The comment was delivered as satire, but its association with her political connections gave it additional weight. Minaj later described the award show as an anti-Christian ritual and suggested that the mockery she experienced was part of a broader pattern of hostility toward her beliefs. This interpretation further polarized public response. Some viewed her reaction as disproportionate, arguing that award show humor is routine and not indicative of institutional targeting. Others saw the joke as dismissive and unnecessary, particularly given the broader context of her criticism of the industry. In this view, the post was not about the joke itself, but about accumulated frustration. Online discussion forums reflected this divide. On platforms such as Reddit and X, users debated whether Minaj's statements represented a genuine belief or a rhetorical strategy. Some described the post as alarming and detached from reality. Others argued that powerful industries often discourage dissent and that her language, while extreme, was meant to provoke attention. A recurring theme in these discussions was the absence of specificity. Minaj did not clarify who she was accusing or how she had obtained the information she referenced. This lack of detail made it difficult to assess intent. It also allowed the narrative to expand without clear boundaries, as different audiences projected their own interpretations onto the claim. The institutional response remained minimal. Award organizers did not comment. Industry representatives did not issue statements. The silence was consistent with past practice, as organizations often avoid responding to accusations that lack evidence. However, this silence also contributed to the perception among Minaj's supporters that her claims were being ignored rather than addressed. As the days passed, the focus shifted from the content of the allegations to their implications. Observers began asking whether Minaj was deliberately repositioning herself outside the mainstream music industry. By framing the industry as morally compromised, she implicitly separated herself from it. This positioning aligned with her recent emphasis on independence, loyalty to her core audience, and skepticism toward institutional validation. At this stage, the conflict had not reached a resolution. There were no retractions, clarifications, or escalations involving named individuals. Instead, the situation existed as an unresolved tension between an artist and the system that once elevated her. The accusations introduced a new dimension to that tension, one rooted not in competition or recognition, but in belief and moral authority. What remained unresolved was whether Minaj intended to pursue this line of argument further, or whether the post represented a moment of reaction rather than a sustained campaign. The absence of follow-up detail left the narrative open-ended. The industry, for its part, appeared content to allow the moment to pass without engagement. As the storyline developed, it became clear that the conflict was no longer confined to music or awards. It had expanded into questions about legitimacy, trust, and the boundaries between artistic expression and ideological confrontation. The situation continued to unfold without a clear endpoint, defined more by implication than by action. The episode has left several questions unresolved, not only about Nicki Minaj's intentions, but about the direction she is choosing for her public role. What began as a reaction to a moment at an award ceremony has expanded into a broader challenge to the legitimacy of the music industry itself. By framing success at the highest level as morally compromised, Minaj has shifted the conversation away from competition and recognition and toward belief, trust, and authority. One immediate implication is the way her language alters how her work is received. When an artist presents the industry as fundamentally corrupt, it complicates their relationship with the same institutions that distribute, promote, and validate their music. Awards, chart performance, and media coverage lose their meaning when framed as products of hidden wrongdoing. This creates a separation between the artist and the system, whether intentional or not. Another implication concerns audience alignment. Minaj's posts appear to resonate most strongly with followers who already distrust mainstream entertainment and cultural institutions. For this group, her statements reinforce existing beliefs rather than introduce new ones. At the same time, they risk alienating listeners who engage with her primarily through music rather than ideology. The result is a narrowing of the conversation around her career from creative output to personal conviction. The industry's response, or lack of response, is also significant. Silence can function as de-escalation, but it can also be interpreted as avoidance. By choosing not to engage, institutions and peers avoid amplifying the claims, yet they also leave space for the narrative to persist without challenge. This dynamic places responsibility back on the audience to decide how seriously to take the accusations. There is also the question of permanence. It remains unclear whether Minaj intends to continue framing her critiques in spiritual and conspiratorial terms, or whether this moment will fade as attention shifts elsewhere. Past controversies involving her have often followed a pattern of escalation followed by disengagement. Whether this instance follows the same pattern or marks a lasting repositioning is still uncertain. In the longer term, the situation highlights the fragility of trust between artists and the structures that support them. When that trust breaks down, even symbolically, it exposes how dependent cultural systems are on shared assumptions about fairness and legitimacy. Once those assumptions are challenged, rebuilding them becomes difficult. For now, the episode stands as a turning point in perception rather than a resolved conflict. It has altered how Minaj is discussed, moving focus away from her catalog and toward her worldview. Whether this shift strengthens her independence or isolates her further will depend on choices she has yet to make. What is clear is that the conversation has moved beyond a single post or a single joke. It now reflects broader tensions between celebrity, belief, and institutional power. Those tensions remain open with no clear resolution in sight.